Could Superman forcefully breathe out air fast enough to make his supercooling breath? So here's the interesting thing there. Superman probably could. It's actually fairly easy to compress air with very small spaces. But compressed air is hot, not cold. When you compress air, the motion of the particles in that air speeds up, which makes it hotter. So compressing air would actually be a horrible way for Superman to get his ultra-freezing breath. There would have to be another step, and that step would have to be Superman's superblood. So the canonical explanation is that when Superman breathes out compressed air from his chest, it expands very rapidly and thus cools off. But if you compacted air and expanded it, it would just return to its previous temperature. But if you compacted air inside a space and then took the heat out of that air and then expanded that air, then that would be very cold air. That's actually how air conditioners work. And if we assume that Superman has lungs that are biologically designed as a sort of gas compressor, then yeah, he would probably be able to compress air under his own breathing force. You don't actually need all that much force to compress air, you just need to have a good container that doesn't leak it out. Anyway, Superman breathes in a whole bunch of air, and it compresses in his lungs. And then his superblood takes the heat from that air and integrates it into his body. Now, in a normal body, this would just create temperature equilibrium, but another thing that DC has said about Superman's powers is that he is constantly radiating heat to prevent himself from overheating from his own super abilities. So we could assume that his lungs take that air, his blood absorbs that heat, and that heat gets radiated out of his skin. And now you have intensely compacted air inside the lungs of a super being that is basically at normal human temperature. When that air escapes his lungs and expands back to its normal density, it will be ultra cold, and it would essentially operate like freezing breath. If he breathed it all out at once, though, it should also create a shockwave as it expands, though, unless he always keeps some air inside his lungs under compression for this very reason, which would be a really interesting biological adaptation. Basically, he's just a biological air conditioner. That's really weird.